My dad sent a group text. Since you're never around, we've transferred control of the family business to your sister. He added, he actually earned it. You just got lucky. I didn't respond. Just opened the banking app and disabled the payroll account I'd been personally funding, $7,200 every month for 5 months. 4 days later, my sister called me at 2 a.m. None of us got paid. What did you do? I just texted back. Good luck earning it now. I, 32M, received a group text from Dad last Tuesday that made my blood run cold. He announced they were transferring control of the family business to my sister because I was never around, and added that she actually earned it while I just got lucky. The message hit me like a punch to the gut, especially since I'd been quietly funding their payroll for 5 months straight. Our family construction business had been struggling since the pandemic. Dad's pride wouldn't let him admit it, but I could see the stress lines deepening around his eyes every time we talked. When Mom mentioned they might have to let workers go, I couldn't stand by and watch 3 generations of hard work crumble. So I set up automatic transfers from my tech consulting income, $7,200 every month flowing directly into their payroll account. I never told them. Dad always resented that I chose computers over concrete, that I built my success in Silicon Valley instead of staying home to carry on the family tradition. My sister had stayed, working her way up from secretary to operations manager, and I respected that. But I also knew the books, and I knew they were drowning. The text came while I was in a client meeting in San Francisco. 23 people in that group chat, including extended family, longtime employees, and family friends. Everyone could see Dad's declaration that my sister was taking over, that she deserved it more than the son who abandoned them for the West Coast. The humiliation burned through me as I watched the congratulatory messages pour in for my sister. I didn't respond to the group chat. Instead, I opened my banking app and stared at the recurring transfer I'd set up months ago. My finger hovered over the cancel button for a long time. These weren't just numbers on a screen. They represented paychecks for people who'd worked for our family for decades, mortgages and car payments and kids' college funds. But Dad had made his choice. If my sister had truly earned control of the business, then she could figure out how to make it profitable without her brother's silent subsidy. I disabled the automatic transfer. The next few days passed quietly. I threw myself into work, debugging code, and attending virtual meetings, trying not to think about what would happen when Thursday rolled around, payday for the construction crew. I'd calculated the timing perfectly. They had enough in the account to cover 1 more payroll, but after that, reality would hit. Thursday came and went. Friday too. I started to wonder if maybe they'd found another solution, if Dad had managed to secure a loan, or if my sister had worked some miracle with the books. Part of me hoped they had. The other part wondered if they'd even noticed the money was gone. Saturday morning brought crickets. No angry calls, no desperate texts. Either everything was fine, or they hadn't realized yet that their safety net had disappeared. I spent the weekend hiking in Marin County, trying to clear my head and figure out what came next. Sunday evening, my sister finally called. Not during business hours, not through Dad. A personal call to my direct line at nearly 2 a.m. Her voice sounded strained when she asked if I'd heard anything about problems with their payroll processing. She explained that somehow their main account had insufficient funds, that 8 workers hadn't received their paychecks, and that she was scrambling to figure out what went wrong. I let her talk for several minutes, describing her panic and confusion, how she'd spent all day calling the bank and checking their systems. Finally, she asked directly if I knew anything about the missing money. The question hung in the air between us, and I realized this was the moment of truth. I told her I'd been covering their payroll shortfalls for months, that the money she thought came from business profits had actually been flowing from my personal accounts. The silence on her end stretched so long I wondered if the call had dropped. When she finally spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper, asking why I'd never told them. The conversation that followed was painful and necessary. I explained how I'd watched Dad struggle with pride and desperation, how I'd seen the stress affecting Mom's health, how I couldn't bear to watch the family business fail when I had the means to help. But I also told her about the humiliation of being publicly dismissed in that group text, about being told I was lucky rather than hardworking, about being excluded from decisions regarding a business I'd been secretly supporting. My sister's response revealed the depth of their financial crisis. She admitted they'd been operating at a loss for over a year, that the contracts Dad thought were profitable were actually bleeding money due to material cost overruns and labor inefficiencies. The business was essentially insolvent without external support, something she'd only discovered after taking control of the books. She begged me to restore the funding, at least temporarily, while they figured out a long-term solution. The desperation in her voice was real, and I could hear her crying softly as she explained how she'd promised the workers they'd be paid by Monday. These were men who'd worked for our family for decades, who trusted that their paychecks would always come through. I felt the weight of their livelihoods pressing down on me. 8 families depending on money that wasn't coming. Kids who needed school supplies, mortgages that were due, medical bills waiting to be paid. The human cost of my decision was becoming impossible to ignore. But I also thought about Dad's words in that group text. The dismissive tone, the public humiliation, the complete disregard for everything I'd sacrificed to help them. If I restored the funding now, nothing would change. They'd continue taking my support for granted while treating me like an outsider, like someone who'd gotten lucky rather than someone who'd earned their success through years of hard work and smart decisions. I told my sister I needed time to think. She pleaded with me not to wait too long, explaining that word was already spreading among the crew about the missed paychecks. Construction workers talk, and soon everyone would know that the family business was in trouble. The reputation Dad had spent 40 years building could crumble in a matter of days. Monday morning brought a flurry of activity. Dad finally called, his voice tight with controlled anger, demanding to know what I'd done to their accounts. I could hear the panic underneath his fury as he described trucks that couldn't be fueled, suppliers demanding immediate payment, and workers threatening to walk off the job site. The conversation with Dad was everything I'd expected and worse. He accused me of sabotage, of deliberately undermining his business out of jealousy over my sister's promotion. When I explained about the monthly transfers I'd been making, he initially didn't believe me. The idea that his son had been secretly funding the business for months seemed impossible to him. I provided him with bank records, transaction histories, and account statements that proved every word. The evidence was undeniable, but instead of gratitude, Dad's reaction was rage. He felt manipulated and deceived, angry that I'd been operating behind his back instead of coming to him directly with an offer of help. His pride was wounded deeper than I'd realized. Dad had built the business from nothing, working 18-hour days and risking everything to create something lasting for his family. Learning that it had been surviving on his son's charity rather than his own business acumen was devastating to his sense of identity and accomplishment. The argument that followed was brutal and honest. Years of resentment poured out from both sides. His disappointment in my career choices, my frustration with being treated like an outsider, his struggles with asking for help, my anger at being taken for granted. Words that had been building up for decades finally found their voice. By Tuesday, the situation had escalated beyond family drama. 3 more workers had quit, taking jobs with competitors who could guarantee steady paychecks. The remaining crew was demanding cash payments before starting each day's work. Suppliers had placed the company on credit hold, refusing to deliver materials without immediate payment. Mom called Tuesday evening, her voice shaky with stress and exhaustion. She'd been fielding calls from worried employees' wives, making promises she wasn't sure they could keep. The family business that had been her pride and joy was collapsing, and she felt helpless to stop it. Her call was different from Dad's anger or my sister's desperation. Mom simply asked me to come home, not to fix the money problems, but to fix the family. She reminded me of holidays around the kitchen table, of the pride in Dad's voice when he'd first shown me how to read blueprints, of the dreams they'd all shared about building something together. Wednesday brought the breaking point. My sister called again, this time with Dad beside her, both of them on speakerphone. The business was finished, they admitted. Without immediate funding, they'd have to shut down operations and declare bankruptcy within the week. 40 years of work gone. But this conversation was different. Instead of demands or accusations, they offered something I'd never heard before, acknowledgement. Dad admitted he'd been wrong to dismiss my contributions, both financially and professionally. My sister acknowledged that the business had been failing long before I withdrew support, that my money had been the only thing keeping them afloat. Most importantly, they asked what it would take for me to consider helping again. Not a desperate plea or an entitled demand, but a genuine question about rebuilding our relationship along with the business. They wanted to know my terms, my conditions, my vision for how things should work going forward. Update 1. The negotiation that followed took place over several days and multiple phone calls. I laid out my conditions clearly. Complete transparency in business operations, professional management structure with defined roles and responsibilities, and formal recognition of my investment as equity rather than charity. Dad struggled with giving up control, but the alternative was losing everything. We agreed that he'd remain as founder and senior consultant, my sister would continue as operations manager, and I'd take an active role as financial director and strategic advisor. Every major decision would require unanimous agreement among the three of us. I also insisted on bringing in an outside business consultant to conduct a complete operational audit. The company needed to understand exactly why it was losing money and develop sustainable solutions that didn't depend on my personal subsidies. This wasn't about blame, but about building a foundation for long-term success. The hardest part was rebuilding trust. Dad's public dismissal of me in that group text had damaged more than just my feelings. It had shown everyone in our industry that the family was divided and weak. We needed to present a united front going forward, which meant Dad had to swallow his pride and acknowledge his mistakes publicly. I returned to work on Friday, exactly 1 week after I disabled the payroll funding. But this time, I came back as an equal partner rather than a silent benefactor. The workers were skeptical at first. They'd heard about the family drama and weren't sure what to expect. But seeing paychecks in their hands again spoke louder than any explanations. Update 2. 3 months later, the business transformation was remarkable but challenging. The operational audit had revealed inefficiencies that went deeper than anyone suspected. Material waste was running nearly 15% higher than industry standards. Labor allocation was poorly managed, and job estimating hadn't been updated to reflect current market conditions. My sister proved to be an excellent operational partner once we gave her the proper tools and training. She implemented new project management software, streamlined supplier relationships, and improved crew scheduling efficiency. Her years of hands-on experience combined with modern business practices created significant improvements in productivity and cost control. Dad's adjustment period was more difficult. Letting go of day-to-day control after 4 decades wasn't easy, but his expertise in client relationships and industry knowledge remained invaluable. We repositioned him as the face of the company for major clients while handling back-end operations through more systematic approaches. The financial turnaround exceeded our projections. By implementing proper cost controls and pricing strategies, the business achieved profitability within 2 months. More importantly, we built sustainable systems that could maintain success without depending on external subsidies. The family relationships healed more slowly than the business finances. Dad and I still had moments of tension, but we'd established better communication patterns and mutual respect for each other's contributions. My sister became the bridge between us, helping navigate conflicts before they escalated into damaging arguments. Update 3. 6 months after the crisis, we celebrated the company's first profitable quarter in over 2 years. The celebration was small but meaningful, just family and the core crew who'd stuck with us through the difficult transition. Dad raised a toast acknowledging everyone's contributions, including mine, which felt like a meaningful step toward complete reconciliation. The business now operates with clear financial oversight, professional management practices, and sustainable growth strategies. We've expanded into commercial renovation work, leveraging my tech industry connections for projects requiring specialized knowledge. The combination of traditional construction expertise with modern business practices created opportunities none of us had imagined. More importantly, the family dynamic had fundamentally shifted. Instead of operating from assumptions and unspoken resentments, we learned to communicate directly about problems and expectations. The crisis that nearly destroyed us ultimately made us stronger and more unified. Looking back, disabling that payroll account was one of the hardest decisions I'd ever made, but also one of the most necessary. Sometimes love requires tough choices, and sometimes helping someone means letting them face the consequences of their actions. The pain was temporary, but the lessons and improvements were lasting. Dad never sent another dismissive group text. Instead, our family communications became respectful and collaborative. My sister earned the recognition she'd always deserved, not through default or family politics, but through demonstrated competence and results. And I found my place in the family business as a respected partner rather than a silent benefactor. The company continues to grow, but more importantly, our family learned to grow together through adversity rather than apart through pride and misunderstanding. Sometimes the best way to show love is through accountability, and sometimes the hardest conversations lead to the strongest relationships.